Okay, today we're going to work on using some sort of, old either takeout or other kind of containers that we would normally, use only once, maybe to heat something up or to get some food to go, and then, clean them, recycle them, compost them, whatever we might do with them. So we will use, maybe some of these things a second time before it gets to being sort of recycled or composted or something like that. So, following the 3 R's of, conservation, right? First thing you want to do is reduce the amount of stuff you use. And then, reuse the things maybe you have, instead of, and then also, of course, recycle, or, some of these newer ones that you can get, this stuff is all compostable. And, so I could probably use it a bunch of times as a form, maybe if I like this shape and stuff, to make a bunch of clay work, and then still, at the end of all that, throw it into my compost pile, and, a year from now, I'll turn it back into flowers or something. So, just gathering different things, we can look at, what we could use. So, this came out of, sort of a microwavable sort of frozen dinner. And this might be a nice sort of form to use a bowl. I don't really like that, so I would, right off the bat, maybe come and trim that off. Just kind of get that out of the way, and who knows, I may use this as a tool at some point too. So that's a nice piece. These things work, these sort of, we call these clamshell containers. We can maybe cut something else. This has this kind of ribbing in here, right? So either we could put it over, or we could lay it in and see what happens with that. And you might get an interesting shape there. This is 1/2 of a piece I already used. So maybe I might want to, experiment with that. And again, thinking about laying this stuff, the clay in here, and then coming over how I'm going to deal with the lip, and how I'm going to deal with that, and how I might deal with that. So I might really want to, right off the bat, if I was going to use that, is also cut this excess sort of piece in here, trim, and, put that aside to throw in the compost later. And then I might get rid of these little things that are sticking out here, just to kind of make it easier to get a more even looking sort of lip on it later on. So those two pieces may be a good one. This is something that we could maybe use too. It's a small little dish. Again, and maybe I want to trim that so everything's sort of flush. It's nice and flexible. Stuff like that. It probably can't take a whole lot of, movement stuff and use before it kind of cracks up and breaks, but it's a piece that we could possibly use. This too, crackers or something came in this, and it has all this ribbing, so we could actually maybe have a nice sort of form that we could use, something like this. And then here's a nice big tall piece, so I can make it something that's just basically like a square bowl, with something like that. Might be kind of a good size. It was, as it sort of dries and shrinks down in the fire rings, we might have a pretty decent sized piece right there. The piece, here's another side of a sort of a larger side of that clamshell, and it's, it's not very deep. This was the top, but this could also, make a nice little like plate. And have a real interesting pattern on here where we could, basically end up with a sort of a foot already sort of formed in there from using that. And again,
I think I would want to trim this off also, just to kind of get it just as even as possible, so I don't have to be playing around too much when I'm finishing it off with the lip and stuff like that.
So there's some different ideas that we can do, one of the things that we could do with something like this, and let's say I, go ahead and cut it loose from this bigger piece, which we might save for
another time. Trim some of this excess stuff off. Trim that, so I can get that out of the way.
is I could lay clay in there, or I could lay clay over it. But I could also use it as a, you know, sort of template. So pretty similar to how we did the fry trays before, where we just sort of cut a rectangle, then cut these darts out. We could use something like this to create a template to put on a flat piece of clay. Like that, and cut out our clay, and then take that slab of clay and pinch it back up and have, you know, basically the same form. So that's something that, you know, you could also use them to do. Now I was thinking about this, you know, I end up with a lot of these when I get, like, you know, takeout, Thai food takeout, and then we could definitely make this, you know, it's a good little, it could be a nice little sort of shape for a little sort of, you know, square-like container that I could put a handle on to make into a cup, or even like a little soup cup, and maybe I want to have a handle in case it's kind of hot, so I don't have to hold it, or like a little ice cream dish or something like that. So again, maybe I will turn this into a sort of template to use, you know, and maybe I might want to get rid of the dry, crusty rice that's still in there. But we'll cut this off, these sort of excess flaps here. I'll probably just get in the way. Put these things to the side. And then I'll just cut down, try to open this up. And these things are kind of folded over and glued together. So I'm hoping that when I cut this and it splays out, it'll sort of stay together in that shape. So, but there's
One way to find out. Just gotta go for it and do it. Then we can kind of just, you know, open that up.
And you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be sort of real perfect, because when we cut our slab out and pull that back up, we'll be able to sort of fix and clean stuff up. You know, that's a nice thing about working with sort of softer clay. It's very, very forgiving, right? As we say. So put this with this. This probably could stand to set up a little bit before I use it, because we have to bring those walls up, so it'd be nicer. So I think what I'll do is try and do a couple of these. Maybe we'll do this one, and we'll do this one. So if I thought there was going to be a problem with the clay really sticking to this, this is kind of this real compressed sort of stuff here. So I don't think I'm going to have a problem if I lay it in there and push it in and then let it set up and then pop it out. But something that's plastic, where the clay might suction up onto it, is, especially these little ribbing and stuff like that, if I lay in or on the outside, just like when we did the coil bowl, we wanted to put some paper towel in there. So, you know, if I start with this, I want to, you know, maybe put some paper towel over it. So that should be just one piece I could probably use. Should be fine. And then just take some clay, and I want my clay thickness to be about 3/8, maybe could be slightly less than 3/8 of an inch. And it's going to have to stretch a little bit. So if I make it really thin, it might stretch too much and get too thin in spots. Or if it's really, really thick, then the problem could be that you know, the piece is just too heavy, especially once we have something inside of it, you know. So I can just kind of center that paper towel, drop this on, and then I'm just going to sort of slowly push it down and get it to form around that bowl.
Some shit around here and just kind of keep pushing down like that.
I can see the way this is shaped, I'm getting sort of a net, sort of a nice formed sort of foot ring on there without having to add a foot ring. Which you can, if we want to. We might think about doing that just to give it a little more lift, make it look a little more finished. So once I have that set up, sort of grab my knife, just to get it cleaned off a little bit, and then kind of figure out where that edge is. So kind of hitting it right about there. And then I'm just going to kind of run that knife right along there.
Shift it over here.
And then might save some of this future use. And I'll be able to pop it off really easily because it is in that paper towel there, right? Now I'm going to want to let that set up a little bit before I sort of finish it off. So I'll sort of put it to the side, let that sort of dry up before I go back and maybe, add a little bit of a round lip to it with a coil, then maybe put a little coil foot, on there too. So then now let's work with this one. Have another slab of clay I can pull out, and what I want to do is kind of lift and sort of start pushing, trying to get that to sort of drop in a little bit more naturally before I start really forcing it. So I kind of want to pull this up so it has plenty of room to kind of drop down in there.
Start stretching up in there, get these corners. Once I feel like it's going to be dropped as much as possible, then I'll just go back and kind of push it in, try to hit that.
Rib there, then just kind of gently get the rest of it to stretch into the sides there. Back now and later too. I'm smoothing it out and trying to get rid of some of my finger marks there. Be easier doing the setup, and then again I'll just try to kind of come up, try to just run it somewhat cleanly up against that edge.
See if I can't skirt those spots where the tabs were. Let's get this out of the way here. I'll do this slab later. And then clean that up a little bit now.
Then I have this, so I might wait, let that set up. It looks like it will pop out relatively easily. Not real. This stuff isn't sort of grabbing it, But we should maybe have a kind of an interesting pattern down there on the bottom side of this after we pull it out that we can see. And I can kind of figure out if I feel like I need to do anything to make that lip better or do anything to add a foot or something to give a little more lift. But I want this stuff to set up. Now, the thing you have to be careful about it in a situation like this, if I let this dry too much on top of this plastic form here, this form isn't really going to shrink. It may be somewhat flexible and push in, but not much. And so if this thing is on there and it dries too much, it'll end up cracking because the clay is going to try to shrink, and the piece that it's on is not going to shrink, and there'll be too much resistance. When it's inside like this, if I let it dry too much, it's going to be pulling in away from the sides, and so it won't necessarily crack, but it'll get to the point where I can't finish it off. I won't be able to sort of smooth and take care of stuff and fix things because it'll be too dry at that point. I won't be able to add a foot. I won't be able to do anything. And once it's bone dry, it'll be too rough and sharp. It won't be worth trying to fix or sand or something like that. Be better just to start over. So it's important to sort of pay attention to these things and see it, you know, how they're doing. Now this one's been sitting in here for 20, 30 minutes. It looks like it'll, you know, should pop out pretty decently, but it still seems like it's kind of floppy. It probably needs to set up a little bit more before I can really put a whole lot of pressure. But now I can kind of see, you know, where I might want to trim some stuff off, clean that up. And it's got a kind of a nice looking on the outside there, similar to the inside of that. And then just kind of fix and clean up some of this inside here and figure out what I need to do to make that look better and more finished on the outside there. So as these things set up, and I can let that set up in the air totally now without having to be in the form anymore. But maybe we'll start with this guy. So, and I'll push this kind of up to the side here, so I, you know, if this was my own slab working with, I know I have this excess here and there, some of these other parts where I might be able to use to make a handle maybe for this whole thing, or have some excess to do another little foot ring to kind of pop it up a little bit more. So I will just cut.
Right down around there. You know, a lot of us are generating a lot of these sort of takeout items.
When in fact, they talked about not too long ago that these containers and these plastic forks and these napkins, paper napkins, all this stuff that comes to takeout has gone, you know, up 300% or so. Because, you know, we can't eat inside the restaurants where we'd use, you know, plates and other things that they would be able to just wash again. So we're getting all this takeout stuff. So we're generating a lot of this stuff, and it's good to, of course, you know, support your local businesses, and especially the places that you really, really like to eat at. You should, you know, make sure you kind of keep going to them so they can stay in business. But we have to think about, you know, what we do with all this stuff and make sure it's getting recycled properly, or, you know, in this case, used as a template. And this stuff is, you know, pretty sturdy. I can probably keep using it over and over again, especially if I made a whole bunch of slabs, let them set up, and then just use the template and start cutting out the shape and all that. I could do a lot with it over time. So then now I just want to score at my edges and sort of bring this up, see how this works. Take my little paper clip here. And it's pretty soft, so I don't feel like I need to do a whole lot of scoring here. And I should be able to easily get in there and kind of work with it. We might want to, you know, kind of see how it goes together. Sometimes would have been a bad idea, maybe bevel that edge a little bit when I cut it, you know, so, but can fix all that. So been saving a lot of the goop, little pieces of dry pieces of clay, and putting it in the water I've been using. So now I have this kind of like slip, actual slip, that's got a little bit of goopy clay, and kind of put that on there. And then just bring it up, slowly kind of pinch that together, shift it. Just kind of shift it and push it. This is very similar to what we do with the fry trays. We just have, you know, much bigger cutouts, so we have these taller walls. Compared to the fry tray, we had this rectangle that we cut out small little triangles, so the walls weren't really very tall.
And then just come back, pinch that.
And when I'm doing this, I'm really kind of trying to push that seam together.
So not only have we got that,
Kind of slip in there, but I'm actually kind of compressing it there.
pushing that together on both sides.
Now this slab is set up a little bit, so which is good. So it's kind of holding its shape. It's not too, you know, wiggly and floppy and all that.
So, just about perfect.
So I'm kind of looking there. There's some stuff that's off a little bit for whatever reason. So I can kind of deal with that. Take the back side of my brush, kind of push some stuff in that seam a little bit. Make sure that's sort of been closed up.
Get rid of that goop that's in there.
And then just like on the fry trays, we kind of pushed along the bottom. I'm going to do the same thing here. Sort of just push down the bottom, kind of define that foot a little bit. And then also, just nice to be able to get in here and kind of smooth out that seam now. Well, it's still a little bit wet. Kind of clean that up. You know, then later, it sets up a little bit more. I'm going to want to probably just finish off and round off all these edges here.
And I think I'm going to want to put a little foot ring on here. Just add a little slab there to kind of make it a little bit taller.
Kind of give it a little lift. It's a little container, so when it shrinks, it might be, you know, kind of a small little container, but it could be a little thing. Again, we had the fry tray, but we can now have this sort of fry cup. Or might be a little nice little thing to put a little dessert in here, a little custard or something like that. Ice cream. A little bit of soup. Something like miso soup or something to that effect. We don't have a whole lot of it. And you can also, you know, looking at this now too, just kind of push that out and give it a little bit of a curve. Visually give it, you know, might make it look kind of nice. Something like this. So this now needs to probably set up a little bit before I think about maybe putting a handle on there. And bottom. I don't think feel like I need to add anything to this rim here. Just kind of push it out and round off all the edges. But it's going to be better if it sets up just a bit. So we'll let these guys set up for a little bit, and then we'll kind of come back and, you know, finish them off. You know, we just need to kind of let them sit out and kind of monitor them, or if you can't get to them right away, you're going to want to cover them with plastic so they can kind of set up a little bit in the plastic but not get too dry. So we'll let these guys set up here, and then we'll just come back and finish them off. Okay, so now that our pieces have set up a little bit more, they've been sitting out for, you know, about an hour or so. And it really depends on the weather. So, you know, if it's kind of warm and dry, you can, you know, kind of let them sit out and check them, and then probably about, you know, an hour they might be, you know, set up enough that you can kind of finish working on them and stuff and get them to position. If it's cold and damp and it's raining outside, then, you know, it'll take a lot longer. You're probably better off just kind of covering it loosely with some plastic maybe, and you know, work on it the following day. You know, so kind of checked out the little bits. What do I need to finish off? What needs to be sort of worked on? I've kind of, you know, flared these out a little bit, pushing a nice sort of curve going on this. Visually sort of looks better. So one thing I want to do with this is I'd like to give it a little more lift. So I would like to have a little rectangle about that size, and then I can cut out some of the piece and just have it sort of set it there. So take some of my leftover pieces. That's a little bit too small. So we'll find something bigger right there. So that should work. So what I'm going to do is kind of get that centered, take a paper clip to mark it, and there's a little curve down there, so I want to kind of run it down along that curve so that hopefully it'll be a little bit smaller. So now I got my lines here. So when I cut, I think I really want to cut just inside that line so that when this thing is sitting on top of there, you can barely maybe see that foot ring. So I will cut just kind of inside those lines.
Just pull that in like that.
And then I don't want to have this flat spot, just attach that on the foot, you know. So I'm going to, you know, cut this sort of rectangle in so that this will be about, you know, 3/8 of an inch wide or so, maybe less.
Take that out because it's unnecessary. We can, you know, still basically end up recycling all this excess clay and using it again.
And we don't want to add too much weight. And they also tend to stay on better if you have that whole flat spot there stuck to the bottom of the piece. It's, you know, all the way flat. It creates problems sometimes in here and wants to separate. So we're going to want to have this. So it's just inside. There's a little curve here, and this is what I want that to be, right there. A little bit of an inside curve, kind of get it sort of set up and centered there. Take my paper clip here, mark. And then mark. And then I can kind of flip that there. So I'm going to score that side and score that. So
come along at an angle there, these lines, and then just kind of crosshatch them real quick. It's still, you know, relatively soft. It's set up where it's in a nice spot to kind of finish off, but it's also still, you know, relatively soft, so it should really attach really well with a little bit of slip. I do my lines and coming back and sort of cross-hatching them. And then get a little bit of water in there, along with some goop. You just go back over it, give it a little more scoring. And when I put this on,
I really want to sort of shift it into position. So it's creating that little like suction as we sort of move through. So just kind of push into that, get into that, those lines there. And then after it's sort of shifted, right, then I want to get that pressure. And since there's a little bit of water in there, when I push down, I should see something kind of squeeze it out. similar to gluing stuff up, and when you're working with wood or you're doing sort of carpentry work and you're gluing two pieces of wood together, when you push them, kind of shift them and clamp them together, you want to see a little bit of glue come out of this, out of the edge there, and that way you know you got good coverage. Same thing with this. I want to see kind of along here in these places that a little bit of that water squeezes out. Oops, and I know I have a nice sort of seal going on there. And then, I could thing, or just take anything, the backside of a brush is always good, the smaller one that has a little bit of a thing, just kind of run, kind of compress that seam. Run along here and do the inside also. And I might take a little bit of water, just kind of clean up that edge. Round off this edge in here. Especially these corners here. I just kind of want to round them off because this has got kind of a curve to it, so I want that to kind of match. So when you look at, there's sort of a continuity of this sort of round edge to this edge here, and it's also rounded off a little bit. So a little bit of water, a little bit of pressure with your fingers, you kind of round it off. And then if I want to go over this a little bit, get rid of some of that texture that might have picked up when I was throwing the slab out on the table or so. Make sure these seams look nice and even. The thing to remember too is that I'm adding these pieces. I add this foot, we have these seams, so we have 4 seams, we add this foot, I'm going to add a handle or something like that, maybe not. I think I might try a handle, kind of see what it looks like. You can always cut it off and clean up the edge before it gets too dry. But I'm going to definitely want to kind of wrap this one because I'm adding these pieces. So now I might think about a handle. Might want to go back to my template. So this section right in here, I might want to, that's probably where that handle might want to be, So use this to kind of carve out, kind of see what that might be. So I don't want it to be on this thicker part, but I think I'm on this thinner part here. So just kind of take it and make some marks. There might be the end of it. Kind of comes up a little bit, and better to go bigger than smaller. So that way I can maybe cut some off and kind of test it. So in there. So then I'll do the same thing, kind of draw out where I want to cut. And then kind of see, is that handle too big, too small? I think we want it to come in a little bit more. So let's say we cut some of this off. And maybe we have an angle there. We got to really look at it visually from the side. You know, is that edge we cut off? It's loose 2 fingers. I probably only need 1 in the end. So I think we're gonna cut a little bit more off there, and then take a look at that. That could work. Now this looks too thin. What it does, and I find that when you do sort of this slab work, for whatever reason visually, whatever this thickness, if this is 3/8, that your handle you want to be twice as thick, so 3/4 thick. So we will just mark it and cut it out of some existing slab that we have.
So, cut.
So I'm going to sort of line these guys up again. Cut that off, and then let's think about scoring them up. And then once I got them together, I can trim them a little bit and see if that's if that sort of works.
Cross hatch that up a little bit here. Pretty good amount there, so I don't think I need to put it on the second one.
Kind of shift that around a little bit. Make sure they're really pinched together. Some pressure. And then let's clean that up. So before I would attach it, it'd be really nice to get this all rounded off, cleaned up, because it's going to be kind of difficult to do once it's on there without tweaking it out a little bit. So now I can kind of look. Does that look like something? You know, I don't know. That's right. It's kind of one of those things. You might have to do a couple of them, kind of decide. But I think on this one for now, we will put this handle and then keep it covered for a day, and then come back and kind of look at it again and decide if it's a good thing or not a good thing.
Gonna mark out where I want to attach it. Cross hatch in there. Slip on there and pressure, shifting, create a little suction. Get behind it. And the following day, I think this is going to need to bake, and I think I want it to flare out. A little curve like these lips. Make sure it's centered. And then, yeah, I think we'll do push it down. Push this up.
And then we have that little curve. I think I like that better. It kind of matches this, some of these curve and these rounded edges and etc. So I'm going to push that in. Keep this covered for a day and kind of make some decisions tomorrow about keeping that handle or not. So there's that piece, and then, you know, let's go back to this bowl. This bowl definitely, I think, needs something. You know, I think even though it has sort of this, you know, rim, but it sure would be nice to put something on there. And this lip definitely needs to be worked on. So for starters, I think we'll work on the lip. We'll kind of
Cut this a little more flush so I can add a coil to it, which will kind of give it a little more height, and then we'll have more volume.
You know, this right here doesn't need to be so perfect. We'll put that coral on, then you can go back and kind of finish it off and clean stuff up and make it look better. And we don't want it to look like a machine made it. We want it to be hand built. It looked like it was hand built. So I'm gonna kind of score this up here a little bit. And then take a coil made earlier. What I'll do is I'll score up that side now.
Scratch it up a little bit here. Come back.
And then attach that on there. And again, I want to make sure I cut this. Kind of 45 there. Score that up. Already get some slip on there. Run this piece over. And then, see, is that right? Shift that all in there. And then just push that on there, kind of put a little bit of pressure, give a little bit of, pressure with my thumb and kind of flatten it out a little bit. So we've kind of raised it. Need to clean this area up here. Again, drying slowly will make a big difference, making sure this lip doesn't crack off. It's a really simple little bowl here that we can do by hand. We need to do a little bit of work on the outside to kind of make things look a little smoother. The inside here, I think I will kind of run. Kind of compress this. And then maybe I do something on top. Maybe I go back to my favorite little stick here. And so not only am I getting a little design, I'm also compressing the clay down on that spot where we scored and slipped. So kind of, again, like assuring that this should be attached pretty well after scoring and slipping it, pushing down on it, and then now adding this little design where I'm pushing once more pressure, and then just as long as I dry it nice and slow and even, it shouldn't pop off. I'm gonna have that. So some of this exterior definitely needs to kind of get a little bit smoothed out and finished. I think this could, maybe get a foot, maybe not. Something to think about. I did one other piece that was sort of small from one of the clamshell, and I added same kind of a lip. But this had that impression from the inside of the clamshell, so I don't think it really needs it. Just needs a little more like TLC on the outside here to kind of even some of the stuff out, get rid of some of the different textures that might have been getting picked up from little bits of things or in the table and this and that. So those could all get worked on. Jury's still out about putting a foot on there. And then we have these guys, so came out of one of the other clamshells. So pretty cool bottom. The inside, still needs some work to kind of make that smooth. Okay, so this definitely needs to be trimmed. So it's easier if I trim it like this and kind of set it down here. and then try to, you know, kind of cut off some of this sort of excess stuff. Not all of it. I like having that flare, but I think I'd like to have a straighter sort of line here. Maybe we kind of cut that nice curve.
Put a nice little curve there. Look at this. And holding the knife upright so that we have a kind of straighter edge there. Let me pop this up. That curve, maybe do a little bit more. And this definitely needs to get kind of straightened out there. And then let's get this curve. And then, you know.
Now we have it. Maybe that looks decent there. And how does it look here? So I think we could get away without putting anything on here. We just got to get this cleaned up. So get these edges rounded. Get this stuff sort of smooth. Get rid of that sort of rough creases in the clay there. And this inside is going to take some work. And it's still not, I might need to let that set up even more. Kind of covered for the night or so and go back to it the following day. Because even though this outer part here looks pretty cool, but you're not really going to be seeing that so much. So it's going to be really important to kind of try to get this inside looking decent. So it's going to take some work. Maybe letting it set up a little bit more so once it's can hold its shape more, you can be, you know, a little more pressure on it without having the thing fall apart. Same, this needs the same thing. We have the same issues here. The inside looks really wacky. The outside looks pretty cool. I need to straighten this stuff out. You know, kind of cut these, get these edges back to something that's worth having. So this could be a fun little, you know, sort of bowl to eat out of, you know, square little container here. Could have fries in there, could have ice cream in there, could have, you know, broccoli, carrots, good stuff, all kinds of things. Same thing here, this could be a nice little soup bowl, could be a little cereal bowl. Kind of think it would look more interesting if it was raised up a little bit more. So I'll probably end up putting that foot ring on there. But you know, there's all this different stuff we can use, all these different, you know, clamshells and stuff like that that we could sort of, you know, use as a form for the inside or for the outside, or even, you know, cut things apart, you know, and create little templates so we can do sort of interesting things with, you know. You know, so much that we can do with slabs. You know, we don't necessarily, you know, need the potter's wheel to create really good functional stuff and or, you know, sculptural pieces. You know, I think there's a lot more we can do with like some of this stuff too. So we'll try to explore a little bit more of that also coming up.